This is an exciting topic. I know it's in everybody's news feeds all day long. So we wanted to talk a little bit about generative AI, what it is, how marketers are using it properly, and in some cases, not so well. And with us today, we have Julie Novick. I will let Julie introduce herself, and really excited to have you here today, Julie.
I'm excited to be here. I am Julie. I am a data scientist and AI designer working with 1848 Ventures, which is a venture studio here in Northeast Ohio. Basically, we build startups that service small and medium-sized businesses and launch and take them to launch, hoping that they'll be successful businesses in their own right. And I do a lot with ethics and thinking about the ways in which we use and humans interact with AI.
Great. So, Julie, do you want to just kick us off and talk a little bit about generative AI and what it is?
Sure. So, generative AI is a type of, essentially, it's an algorithm that takes text prompts. In many cases, though that is expanding to other types of prompts, but it takes like a text prompt, like say you want a purple balloon flying through the sky, and it creates an image that is supposed to be completely novel and new using that text prompt, or it can be in the form in ChatGPT. It could be a text prompt that, like, you ask it a question and it gives you a completely new answer that what shouldn't exist prior. And so what it does, these are complex models. They're generative models and diffusion models that are based on the magic of deep learning. And they're, in a sense, if you can kind of think of them as like a fancy autocomplete. It starts with one set of information and that gives the next logical solution to that, the next logical answer to that statement, but on a grander scale with a lot of more nuance to it.
Okay, great. So, one of the things I thought we could do, I don't know how many of you are familiar with things like DALL-E 2 and ChatGPT, and if you've had a chance to play with any of those tools, but I thought I'd go ahead and share my screen and maybe we could have a little fun and have DALL-E 2 start by generating an image for us based on a text prompt. Can you all see my screen?
I can, yep.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with a description of a picture that we want to see and have the DALL-E 2 AI create it for us. Does someone want to call out something that they would like to see generated? Just a brief description.
What about a globe, like of the world?
Okay, a globe of the world. Anything else? Globe of the world.
With Ohio.
Okay, with Ohio. All right, let's see what DALL-E 2 creates for us.
That's very on brand for me, Nicole, so I figured that's a good place to start.
Yeah. So here is what it came up with, although it's Olho instead of Ohio.
That's interesting.
Anybody else want to come up with a quick prompt? Maybe something you're working on?
Well,
Someone
Patrick
put a chat that a banana in the unicycle.
A banana and a unicycle?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And you can actually feed your own images. And I wish I would have prepped this because we have 3 dogs and I fed it an image of my 3 dogs standing on my deck. And what it came up with was nightmare fuel. It was really terrifying. So here's your banana and a unicycle. So, all right, let's move on from that. And let's go ahead, and it's going to make me stop sharing for a second. So let's move on to ChatGPT, which I think is really being heavily used by marketers. Okay, can you see this?
Yep.
Has anyone here had a chance to play around with ChatGPT at all?
Yes, I have.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about what you've used it for?
We've used it to draft initial versions of outbound marketing communications for like letters and flyers. We've fed it information. It's given us 300, 300 word pieces of content, which has taken us about 85% of the way to completion.
Right. So, ChatGPT is great, to Patrick's point, for a lot of things marketing related. It's great for helping you generate content for a blog, or maybe if you're, kind of having a moment of writer's block around an ad campaign and the messaging for that, it can kind of get you going. Some of the considerations when using tools like this are, it's prone to some misinformation, and Julie's going to talk a little bit more about the ethical considerations next, but it can be prone to misinformation, just flat out making stuff up. The way that I like to use tools like this is I think of them as like a co-pilot. I know that I'm still going to have to do, proofreading and editing and making sure that the facts are correct. And I'm going to have to, wordsmith what it's created. But I thought, maybe in the spirit of what we did with Dolly 2, we could really quickly, enter a few prompts into ChatGPT and see what it will come up with for us. So does anyone have anything in mind that they want to ask, or, something that it would like ChatGPT to come up with content about?
What about a few social posts? I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but write 3 tweets wishing your teammates a happy weekend, or a good weekend coming up.
Okay, 3 tweets to we'll just say wish people a happy weekend. And it usually takes a second. There we go. Nice. It even provides the hashtags. Weekend vibes. I like it.
As we're waiting, and I don't know if this is an example we want to try, but I've seen a few people mention prompts where they'll have them then rewrite these 3 tweets, but do it in a like do it in the voice or the context of William Shakespeare is like one extreme example, and then have it like a second one being like in the voice or context of like Michael Scott from The Office, where you can really see the difference in the writing style and kind of the content of it all, even within like the prompt of this.
All right, let's see what it comes up with. I'm a huge Office fan.
Which a episode on ChatGPT would have been pretty amazing if The Office was still going on.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
There we go. So you get the idea. Recently I've been, kind of doing some updates on Pandata's website. And we're really kind of carving out a niche in high risk and regulated industries. And so it's been kind of great to help get me thinking in the right direction. Now, of course, I've had to wordsmith it. And at first, as someone who has been a career-long copywriter, it felt like cheating. It felt a little inauthentic. But when I started reframing how I thought about these tools and that it's not necessarily replacing me, it's helping me, it's my co-pilot, then I really embraced it. And it's really kind of helped cut down on the time that I have to spend, starting from scratch writing. So anyway, you get the idea on how we can use it. So let's talk a little bit about, some of the ethical considerations. Julie, you want to kind of walk us through some of the, recent headlines and maybe, some of the landmines?
Sure. So right now, especially so there's ChatGPT and the image generating like DALL-E 2, they pose similar but different landmines to be thinking about. When you're with ChatGPT, there have been some incidences, especially in this not really in the marketing world, but where it's copied and directly copied information text that was used, that is copyrighted by someone else. And it's embedded that within the new novel information, and it comes out. And that's more along the lines of plagiarism. It's also, with going back to the fact, there's a tendency, 20% of the time, they're called technically hallucinations, where the text is completely fabricated and made up, so the facts are completely wrong, and it's this fantasy hallucinatory world that it's creating, and so the information you're given is not correct. So if you don't carefully proofread and fact check, you could get into a lot of trouble. There was a case where it was giving false information about the GDP of a country, or the income, the revenue that a particular company brings out. And if you publish that, then you're on the hook for that misinformation. And there's also embedded bias. These models are trained on massive data sets that aren't as curated as maybe some of us would have hoped. So they reproduce a lot of the bias that's already out there in the world. So you want to check to make sure that there's not unintended bias in the text that you're producing through using these. So again, as Nicole said, you want to proofread, you want to fact check, you want to make sure that it's right when it's with the information it's giving you. Don't want to just wholeheartedly take it and run with it. As Patrick said, it takes you 80% of the way there, and the human has to take it the other 20%. When you use image generation, that is a different scape. There are lawsuits currently in the courts by artists who found that the information that they were used in the training sets, and that their styles, living artist styles, are being used as prompts, as in DALL-E, like in the style of, so Vincent van Gogh is passed on, but like of living artists. And because of that, these works are being tested to see if they're considered derivative, who owns the copyright to them. I recently had a new conference this week. NVIDIA is combining with Getty to produce their own image generating app. And some of these models were trained on Getty images. And so if a Getty water stamp appears on an image that isn't a Getty image, then that creates a problem, especially since they want their own solution to come into the market. So it's, sometimes these models will reproduce like signatures of artists on a new image. And that questions like, okay, then who owns that image because it has a signature on it? So these are the kind of ethical questions that are coming up with the image generating software. Now with that, the more, when you want to use them, you want to avoid living artists as prompts. So like the example where we used Michael Scott, if Michael Scott was an actual person, then that would be something you'd want to avoid if you were going to use it for something more than fun. You'd want to be as specific as possible in what you want generated. So the more detail you give it, the more likely it'll be original. So that's another tip to remember in the image generating apps. Also, there are a couple out there. There's DALL-E 2, Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion is the one that has the most problematic training set. So even though it's one that you can create on your own, put it on your laptop and use it without training wheels, it's probably the one to avoid. You probably want to stick with something like DALL-E, where there are bumper things in place to prevent you from generating something that might be an ethical violation. So you want to choose which app you use carefully. Those are some of the things I can think of. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue, into a little bit of Q&A while we've got Julie, an accomplished data scientist with us. So anything that might be on your mind about these tools, generative AI in general, Julie's a great resource, so feel free to ask away. Go ahead, Jason. Nope, not sure if you're talking, Jason, but we can't hear you. Did we lose him? Oh, no, he's there. Oh, okay, there's one in the chat here from Madison. Let's see, is there a way to see the sources that ChatGPT used when answering the question or prompt?
That's a good question. Currently, OpenAI is not publishing their training set, so there's no way to know for sure what the source is. In one way is to ask for sources while you're in your prompt and see what it produces, and then check those.
Okay, great. Patrick wants to know, are there ways of protecting your content from being swept up by AI?
That's a very good question. Currently, that's being decided by the courts. There are no current regulations in the US about what can be used and what can't be used in the training sets of AI.
It's coming though.
It's coming. It is coming. And these court cases are challenging every day, trying to figure out what the boundaries are. There is a site for artists currently called Have I Been Trained? So if you're an artist or you can check to see what's known as in training sets. Have you been used in some of these models as a training set? There's a couple of them out there like that. That's the one I know of. Just being vigilant, making sure your stuff is copyrighted so that you have some legal recourse to action.
Yeah, I mean, the EU is definitely a lot further along than us. I think Canada's currently working on some regulations. We are definitely behind the 8 ball in this country, but it's being talked about, it's being shaped, so it's coming. Another question from Madison. Should content be marked with a disclaimer like created using AI or ChatGPT? I saw one healthcare site that did this, but I wonder if it's necessary since most of the content comes from somewhere, whether it be an AI tool or Google itself.
That's a really good question. My personal thoughts on that are it can't hurt. To let people know that it, especially with art, that it was created with using an AI. With the text, ChatGPT, assuming, making the assumption that you're proofreading it, editing it, double checking the information, that may be a little bit of a gray area where the human is like, I've submitted content to someone and they've edited it and changed it and modified it, and it becomes a dual work. It becomes part of their work as well. But when it comes to things like images, that I think a disclaimer would be helpful.
Great. Jason, do you have a question?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can.
Okay, great. So I guess my question would be around, like, is there any proactive like consortiums around royalties or any kind of payments going forward as far as intellectual property on trademarks and copyrights? Are you hearing anything, and are attorneys even involved in that space at all?
It's so new that I haven't heard of anything that's developed, but I'm sure it's coming. I know that I don't know much more than that, but I would see it coming and be something to be aware of. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I feel like, you know, we're hearing more and more every day. So I think this is just going to be, you know, continue to be trending. And, you know, like, what was it? GPT-4 just came out last week. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between 3 and 4 really quickly? And then we've got another question.
With 3 and 4 is leaps and bounds better in terms of how much more fluid and human sounding and yeah, it's a much different creature. If you thought GPT-3 was impressive, GPT-4 will blow your mind. In terms of how well it can communicate as a text model. I've been told that it's doing better with hallucinations, so it's not hallucinating as much as GPT-3 was, but it still does from time to time. And it's being implemented in things like the Bing chat and other large scale chatbot services that are being produced. It's starting to be implemented into those.
Great. Okay, so we've got a couple more questions, and then I have a couple of tools that I want to share with everyone before we wrap up here. Patrick wants to know, with AI SEO becoming significantly easier, if everyone can do this much better, will it have an impact on Google and its ability to provide relevant, useful results?
So that's a really great question, and something I've read about recently is that while there's no way to detect completely that something has been created with ChatGPT, if something sounds or looks like it's spammy, Google will downgrade the SEO on that. So it's very important to make sure that the quality of what your output looks to be human generated. Because, you know, so again, it goes more specific prompts, edit it, make it more polished. I think that's the differentiator between something that's just completely generated by an AI versus something where a human has their hand in it, which will improve the SEO.
Okay, great. We have 2 more questions, and then we'll get to the quick list of a few tools worth using. Could you explain the difference between Bard and ChatGPT? Do you think one is better than the other?
Yes, Bard is made by Google and ChatGPT is OpenAI. Bard was just released to a lot of people today, so I haven't had a chance to see compare the impact, like the results you get from Bard. And I haven't had a chance to dig under the details to know the details about like what's different about the algorithm. But they were produced using different techniques, different technologies by 2 different organizations. From the feedback I've heard from my colleagues is ChatGPT is still more impressive than Bard in terms of what it produces.
There was a recent story about Bard having a conversation with someone, and it took a turn for the weird.
Yeah.
Do you recall that story where it was trying to convince the man that it was chatting with to leave his wife?
Yes, that was not Bard, that was
That wasn't
Bing.
part. Okay.
That was
Okay. I
Bing's
gotcha.
chat,
Gotcha.
also known as Sydney. It gave itself a name. But yeah, that was a little bit unusual, and that's probably something along the lines of, because it's essentially an autocomplete in a sense, so it's creating this hallucination of this pattern of conversation that it's just sticking to. Yeah.
Okay, so we have time for one more question. Emily wants to know, ChatGPT can be intimidating to young people as we kick off our careers. What advice do you have to get started and dip your toe in AI marketing and PR?
So that's a great question. The advice I was given about using these tools is that in the future, being able to use the tools will set you apart from those who have not been able to use the tools.
Yeah. And I've heard the same thing. And I agree, as a marketer who's now currently using ChatGPT to help kind of inform some of the work that I'm doing. I would say play around with it first, get comfortable with the technology before you start implementing it into anything that you're doing with your organization. I played around with it, had some fun with it first before I started actually using it to help me generate content. So I think that's a great place to start. I really quickly wanted to mention a couple of tools that you can use. Obviously, ChatGPT to generate marketing content. Another tool that you would have to pay for is called Writer, Writer. It helps you create marketing content, snippets. It can even help you create things like style guides for your business. And then Descript is a great AI powered transcription, overdubbing service. It can help you with podcasts. It does a lot of editing of text and even voice recordings. So I'm happy to, include those in an email if we send one out to this group after the session. And then I will really quickly share my screen so that you can have Julie's contact, my contact, in case you have any questions. And I think that's it, unless anyone has any questions in the last minute.
Well, Nicole and Julie, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your work, and everyone for joining, and also the questions and the chats. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we can send around a post recap email with some of these links. I know I dropped just an interesting article that I had read earlier in the Wall Street Journal. So we can include stuff like that too, but appreciate everyone. And most of all, Nicole, thank you for chairing this and helping set up another great one. It's a very timely and interesting topic. And so I'm so glad we're able to do it and grateful for your leadership to make it happen. So thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah, thanks. I know we threw a lot at you, but I hope this was helpful. And
Great.
thanks, Julie, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so
Anytime.
much.
All right,
Have a
take
great
care,
day,
everyone.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.